Welcome to Glad You Asked. Today, we are excited to get into a question: is it a sin to wear or own crystals? Short answer is no, but I want to elaborate some more on that because you can move from being a no to a yes really quickly if you're not careful. And so we want to first of all start off with the basics of everything that is created, being created for the glory of God. Colossians 1:16, the Apostle Paul writes and says these words: "For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him." And so when we say all things, we mean here on earth, crystals, rocks, stones, were all created for the glory of God. Even the scriptures talk about the fact that the stones will glorify God if people don't. And so we know that the rocks and the earth that was made for the glory of God. And so this means that all things are good because God made them good. Now, when it comes to wearing crystals or rocks or stones, we're going to say that I think there's a scriptural basis that these things in and of themselves are not out of bounds or immoral or idolatry. And so when we think about, through the Old Testament, for example, the Levitical high priest would wear a breastplate, and on that breastplate he would have crystals or stones. He had 12 of them, and each one of them represented one of the tribes. And so we know that these stones were used for decor. They were used as accessories, and they had a specific symbolic purpose, but we know that they were used. And just in modern example of us using a stone and wearing it as jewelry or as an accessory would be, when you get married, the lady gets a diamond ring to symbolize the fact that she's married and that she is engaged. So you have this ring, and it is a stone, obviously, and so you could wear that. And so there are other types of jewelry that you may wear in order to have stones or crystals that are really just a person wear them as accessories. So we would say, yes, it's okay to wear stones or crystals for jewelry. Where we would say this might get a little off track would be if we're starting to look to crystals for our help. We were to look to crystals as some sort of thing that we should worship in order to gain power. Throughout history, people have used crystals in all different ways, especially when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, you would see what was called the New Age movement. The New Age movement was big into crystals and being one with nature. And so when we take a look at Scripture, we know that that's not a goal for us, is to look for at crystals or stones for their power, nor to be one with the world, but to be one with God through Jesus Christ by the Spirit. And so that's where we are looking to be one with God, the Creator, not the creation. With that in mind, we think about crystals and stones and how they're used in sort of mystical practices, maybe in occult practices and things like that, that we should be careful in how we use these stones. Obviously, we don't want to make an infinity a hand glove so that we can put the infinity stones on there. That would probably be out of bounds if you're familiar with any of the Marvel story. And so when we look at these things, we want to take these in consideration, that we want to be careful about looking to created things and creation for things like stones are often looked at in things like the New Age movement for healing, or maybe if you have this certain stone, it will, make you attract wealth to your life, or maybe even to ward off evil spirits. And so we want to be careful in how we handle these things. And I think going beyond wearing them as accessories or using them for decoration would be getting off limits. I want to give you a couple passages that kind of help us to understand this. And the first would be found in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 16 and 17. It says, "And they stirred him to jealousy with strange gods." So God was stirred to jealousy with abominations that had provoked him to anger, things that God got mad about. They sacrificed to demons that were no gods, and to gods they had never known, to new gods that had come recently, whom the fathers had never dreaded. And so what we look at is that this practice of idolatry was that there was these sacrifices done to these different idols, but actually behind the idols were demons. Paul reiterates this in his writing to the Corinthians. This would be in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 19 and 20. He writes these things. He says, what do I imply then? That the food offered to idols is anything, or that the idol's anything? No. So the stone, the wood, the metal is really nothing. He says, no, I imply that what pagans sacrifice, they offer to demons and not to God. And I don't want you to be participants with demons. Years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Sedona, Arizona. And if you're familiar with that, you know that that's a place where stones and crystals, and there's a lot of nature worship going on there. This is the kind of thing that the Old Testament warns us about. Paul warns us about, that behind the idols, there can really be a power. So if you were to say, can these stones bring about healing? Well, they can if the demons work behind them, that there is power behind the stones. And so you want to be aware of that. And so we don't want to fall into some occultic practice, some form of idolatry. We want to avoid that. And so it's okay to have the stones to use at your house as a display, or to wear, on a necklace or something like that. But to go past that would be moving into this area of, say, witchcraft, sorcery, and those sort of things. So we want to be careful with these things. As a matter of fact, this is the proclivity of man since the fall, is that he would begin to worship the created things rather than the Creator. As a matter of fact, the Apostle Paul talked about that people who fall into this kind of practice will end up worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. He writes about this in Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 23. He says, for the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. They fall for lies. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown to them. So you can know that God is there. His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, having been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made. So you can look out and you can see that God exists, so that they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God and give thanks to Him. They became futile in their thinking, and so their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. How? They exchanged the glory of an immortal God for images resembling mortal man, birds, animals, and creeping things. In other words, created things. So what I want to encourage you to do today is, if you're using crystals, stones, gems, and those sorts of things for accessories with your clothing or in your house, I think those are fine. But to go beyond that would be moving into an area that I think would be off limits in our relationship with God. So we always want to be focused on looking toward the Creator, not toward creation, for our hope, for our healing, and to keep us in right relationship with God. So hopefully this will give you a good answer that is, yes, you can use them as accessories. No, don't use them as anything more than that. Thank you for joining us for Glad You Asked today. Hopefully this brings some clarification for you. If you have a question that you would like some clarification on, would love to entertain that, you can send that to info@gracepointchurch.org. Don't forget the E after the T. We look forward to hearing from you. May God bless you.